I don't know.
That's what they said.
Something sounds rather odd about that.
I know Scott Howard is
Yes.
leaving.
Agenda, we canceled one meeting, so we're gonna start at 6:15 with pool management, with Parks and Lands Committee, Mrs. Keener.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think that we had talked back at the end of last year about bringing in a couple of different pool management companies. This is not selling the pool. This is simply contracting out, just as we do for mowing in the city parks and that type of thing. Definitely more involved than mowing, but we have talked to two different companies, and Mr. Scott and Mr. Zick and someone from
John May.
John May, thank you. We're in those meetings. We did some a rubric of grading the two different groups, and I think that Mr. Zick has somewhat of an update for us.
Yeah, so we're getting to the time where the pool season's going to start. I know Ms. Klinger did a lot of her lifeguard recruitment around the March timeframe. So we did get some good bids from two companies, USA Management and Columbus Pool Management. I am almost done with the reference checks. So far, there have been no issues with those reference checks. The one issue I'm waiting on is one of the companies is a nationwide company. They gave me two references from out of state and one reference from in-state that I have not been able to connect with. So I've asked them to either get that company in touch with me or give me another Ohio reference. So before we move forward, and I'm hoping that the mayor, Amber, Terry, and I can sit down before the end of the week and decide on which of the two companies is the best. And then it's up to council to decide if we want to enter into a contract with the management company. A lot of cities, counties, townships, they do bring in a company to manage the pool. It's typically a fixed rate where we pay the company, we keep all the revenues from the pool. So concession revenue, ticket memberships, that kind of thing. We really want to make sure, I think I speak for everybody, that this is the best fit company for the city. And so what we hope to do, I believe, is bring to council's next meeting a pretty solid recommendation. But I know we've only talked about this briefly, so I want to make sure
Are the bids close from company to company?
It's difficult. We're trying to make an apples-to-apples comparison. The one bid came in very low, but they weren't aware that we needed staff for concessions. They also offer what's like a tiered plan, where there's like a bronze, gold, platinum. And the tiers basically mean they start paying people better. So the one company came in right around the pool budget, $460,000, but they were paying lifeguards around $14 an hour, whereas the company, their base plan was like 10 or 11 bucks an hour. So what I'm going to try and do this week is put together a spreadsheet that shows where they compare. Because the one company is willing to supply chemicals, the other company said, well, we'll just tell you what we need and you can order it at your rate. So there's a few discrepancies, and it's really an RFP process, so they can propose to us what they think is best. But before we make a decision, I'm going to make sure that we know that there are some costs company A is assuming that company B isn't assuming.
If I could.
Yeah, Mike.
A couple questions. I was
I actually had this on my mind. That's why I emailed Amber and asked her to have this meeting. I would ask, that we have this long enough we could take it to 3 readings for public input, that we're not trying to rush it through because we're running out of time. There will be public input. I know we already lost one manager to the country club because of uncertainty what the future was. I had a manager in my office today. I just want to follow up. They told me that pool personnel has been let go. They were not asked to come back. Is that true?
I am not aware of us letting go of any.
I just quoted.
Yeah, we haven't let anybody go.
I think that might be a confusion because we are doing this process, and generally the hiring that Mrs. Klinger would do wouldn't even start until March. So maybe there's an assumption that they wouldn't be hiring from our pool of people, but I think both companies.
That is
talked
one of the
about-
assumptions, and one of the assumptions is, are they going to hire local? Are they going to run it local?
Yeah.
Yes.
And both companies have indicated that we are far enough away from the Columbus market that they can't, guards aren't going to drive from, let's say, Lewis Center, Ohio to Mount Vernon for a $15 an hour job. So they've both indicated they want to hire completely local. They want to use our current list of prior employees to try and reach out and get them in. And that would include for pool managers. The one thing I think we're going to have to think very hard about is if we're going to do it ourselves, the pool manager wage probably needs to be better than $10,000 a summer. I know Ms. Klinger spent 7 days a week at the pool, so we're going to need to increase that pretty significantly. Otherwise, the company can come in and they've indicated, and they've done it before, both of them, they'll hire prior pool managers as employees of the company. The one advantage we have with a private company hiring our guards and everything is there is no PERS cost. So Social Security, what's that, Mr. Scott?
That's 6.
So 6.2% going toward Social Security versus 10% going toward pensions. So that it is a bit of a savings, and I don't think most lifeguards ever realize any benefit from that PERS contract.
So it's safe to say then that the management wasn't let go?
We haven't let go of anybody at the pool.
I think that there's just a timing thing that people are watching this happen but not hearing yet, which is completely normal in any given year. And we still anticipate them reaching out by that same time period. I do want to ask Mr. Scott if he has anything that he would like to say. I'd like to give you some time if you would like it. Okay.
So, question, do we have a list of, like, everything that we pay for, like I'm just for lack of a to-do list? We have to have X number of managers and guards, and we have to have this many, this much concession purchase for the summer, or, do we have a list so we know what it might, what it should cost?
Yeah, we have historical documentation, so we know what we spend on concessions, which we'd still spend. We know what we bring in on concessions. We know what we bring in on ticket sales. We know how many that was all built into the RFP we sent out. So we know we need 12 lifeguards on duty, and things like that.
And if you look at Mr. Scott's budget, he breaks it down really well in the pool budget. And if you still have your packet, you can go back through. And in a lot of places, you can see where the OPERS even is taken out for pool individuals specifically. So a lot of our numbers we took straight from what he had, gave them out for the bid, and that is what we're working on. We're anticipating the same exact style of pool to be operating because we based it on what he already had. I hope that answers the question.
One other question. So, what were we paying lifeguards last summer?
$10.50 to $11 an hour, maybe.
So, are the two bids, are they showing
Nobody
a
else does.
higher wage for those?
The one bid is showing like a $14 an hour wage, I believe. The other bid, it's kind of up to us. They're showing around the same wage, but we can pay like an extra $20,000 and they'll bump the wages. We can pay an extra $40,000, they'll bump the wages higher. So that's why I have to build out a spreadsheet for the team here because, the one company has pretty much said that they're going to pay these wages. And one of the things I want to talk to them about if they're selected is, do we need to be quite that high? I mean, they're basing their wages a lot on the Columbus market, and I think we could maybe save a little bit on the bid if maybe they pay 13 instead of, a smaller increase year over year.
Well, last year, we were on the hook when we couldn't find enough guards. Who's on the hook if we have a company like this that can't find guards?
If they don't find guards and they have to close the pool for that reason, there's actually a built-in penalty for them.
So, you don't increase wages that much at McDonald's without increasing the price of a hamburger. So, ticket prices, you're talking have to go up. Have we put a number at that? That was one of the concerns I've heard from the community. And then if I can finish real quick, Terry, our debt on that is how many more years? And the city's been covering that debt without the pool income to begin with, correct? So has there been talk on what a ticket may be to get in?
I think that,
Preliminarily, we've been discussing what that ticket price is. We're wishing to keep the ticket prices the same. Whether or not lessons are included in that price is debatable. We haven't come to a landing on that.
And we could do that without the city subsidizing any more than they are?
Well, that's certainly the plan.
Good.
Yeah. And, obviously we want people in the Mount Vernon City School District to have that price break. And not, but again, it's the lessons that were baked into the overall cost before. And we weren't able to do that last year because of the hours that we had to turn back. But I think we had like 7 cancellations, or it was just a handful of cancellations, if that, because they couldn't get the lessons. So people still wanted the pool pass, the water park pass.
I did offer the management team the, told them they had the podium if they wanted to come speak.
I will say also that we do still plan to partner with the YMCA, which will enable some swim lessons to still be occurring at the pool, so it's not that no swim lessons will be occurring. It will just be formatted a bit differently. Janice, go ahead.
Could you make the payment like in the city and out of the city have 2 different prices?
Yeah, they do.
Yes.
They do that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
And that is something that we want to continue moving forward as well.
Okay.
And I do believe we haven't increased the fees very much as long as the mayor and I have been here, but I think the last time we did it was only on out of city. Is that correct?
Yes.
So we only increased the rates in the last 3 years to out of city,
Out of the city.
or out of school district residents.
Any other questions? I'm out of time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
We're
President.
gonna adjourn the Parks and Lands. We're gonna move now to utilities with Mrs. Woods to discuss the water plant control system.
You need TV monitors on.
Oh, you're good for this one.
Okay.
I don't have a presentation yet. That's for the next couple of rounds. Okay, so we are talking today first about the Gray Matter Systems contract. I talked extensively with Dave Hall today, our water treatment plant chief operator, so that he could give me some background on this company and the contract and what we're looking to authorize today. So Gray Matter Systems actually came in and did the initial installation of our current control technology at the plant. So they have been a partner with us at the plant for a very long time. Right now, they have gone through 5 recent phases of updating technology for the automated control systems throughout the distribution area. So what they have done so far in little bite-sized chunks is update the SCADA, which is basically the technology to be able to supervise the machines and their processes. So that's been updated. The second phase was updating automation at the Rainy East well field. And then the third phase was to update the automation technology at Rainy West well field. The fourth phase was again updating automation technology for the Worcester Road booster station and then the associated elevated tank. And they are right now working on their 5th phase, which is to update the automation technology for the New Gambier Road booster station and then the East End elevated tank. So we definitely have a lot of history with gray matter systems in the initial technology that is still being used today at the water treatment plant, but then also doing consistent updates to that technology so that we make sure we have automated systems that are functioning to their best capabilities. What we are looking at for today's authorization would be a 3-year sole source contract with the group so that we can move into the actual water plant. This is a much bigger chunk of work than those small phases that they've been going through, which is why we are requesting that we do this longer 3-year contract. The first phase is pretty much going to be ready to go as long as we get authorization right at about March 1st. They are wrapping up that 5th phase right now, and they actually already have the parts that are necessary for this 6th phase to get it moving, so that it can be going quickly instead of a waiting period of getting all of the technology in-house. Dave did let me know that we've had a substantial cost savings over time, and we'll still have some cost savings as we go into the next phase of work, because the water plant operators, the actual staff, are doing a lot of the physical installation. So gray matter is really the engineering technology experts. They're the ones that are doing the programming, explaining what needs to be connected where, I guess. And then our guys go out and actually install it and get all the hardware in there. So because they don't have to be on site, that helps save some money there. I have some other information that if you guys have any questions, I can try to answer as much as I can.
So I will say the engineer is requesting that this get passed on first reading tonight, so Emily can kind of extrapolate why that's done. You mentioned a little bit, they're ready to go.
Yeah, this phase 5, which they're finishing up, Dave on the phone today, he said March 1st at the latest, if not a few days earlier than that, they can be finished and ready to transfer their work over to the next phase. Parts have already been purchased for that ahead of time, expecting us to be ready to move quickly. So because those are in, we are ready to do phase 6, but there's also some additional considerations that we want to expand this into a 3-year contract for. It's not going to be just this next phase 6. There's going to be other automated aspects that come next. And then with that, Dave also really wants to make sure that the staff over there get trained. And so part of this contract that we would be going into them would be actually having them train the employees that are using the technology so that everybody in there knows how to work it and operate it now that it's improved.
And is what we're approving tonight, this 3-year contract, going to cover multiple phases, or is it a 3-year?
Yeah.
And we have a cost, an estimated cost?
So when I talked to Dave today, he said because they're wrapping up phase 5, they're still getting a scope, but he estimated about $100,000, if not slightly below that, for this next chunk. And then as we go into next year and then the year after, we'll be more aware of the amount and we'll budget for those accordingly.
Question.
So we're approving something we don't know what's gonna cost?
The first year is $100,000,
Mm-hmm.
but so why the multi-year? Just keep them.
Would
I'm
the
not
multi-year be because you have such a long window of time for these items to come in, and if they know that they're going to be bringing them in 2024 or 2025, they can start to order them now? Because some of these pieces are taking 18 months.
Yes, they definitely are. I would say that is an aspect of it. And I can check in too on Dave. I mean, he really emphasized the training portion of it. They're also going to be able, over time, partner with us more on the network accessibility side. So part of this contract would be for them to do an analysis and work with us on what processes are best for the automated technology. So how can we access it if there's an issue, and determining the best technology for that. But I can check with him.
So let's go to
And
Mr.
get-
Hawkins'
yeah.
question though. If we're entering into a 3-year contract and we think the first year's gonna cost $100,000, what are we agreeing to in year 3?
Right.
And what says this is the year?
Yeah, can I maybe ask a question of Rob and Emily? If I understand it correctly, most of our contracts have a termination clause in them. So if we were to come to year 2 and find that the cost is unreasonable, would we have the ability to terminate even if, we have authorization?
I generally insist on that term in our contracts.
Yeah.
But isn't there the possibility also that we could ask them to limit what work we do in each calendar year so that it fits within the budget?
Yeah, I think that would be. I mean,
So I guess I'm confused about the contract. Are we contracting them for hourly rate and we're asking them to do stuff, or are we asking them to do a project for, you said it's gonna be about
Right.
$100,000?
What is the scope of work this year?
right.
And then what is the scope of work in the following 2 years?
Is the contract written?
So I'm not certain on the scope of work right now. My understanding with talking with Dave today was that they were wrapping that up because they were finishing phase 5. It's almost like overlapping in time right now. So I have not seen the scope of work or been in conversations about their plans in detail, in enough detail that I can provide for your guys' questions
So
tonight.
Rob hasn't seen the contract yet either then?
So if you're saying they would be ready to go March 1st, there's still, I know he requested first reading, Carl's not here to answer that question, but if we were to pass this at the 27th meeting, does that still get us?
Yeah.
to the
As long as,
Yeah.
as long as the
Yeah.
contract's been reviewed by the, as
Whole lot better answered
long as the
question.
contract's been reviewed by our law director for
Yeah.
one,
Yeah,
and then we have the answers to the money, we could possibly pass it next meeting, but there's too many open holes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about having an open checkbook as
Like-
far as year 2 and 3.
It's like, here, go shopping.
I just like to have some finality to it.
Yeah, I understand.
all right, so I think we'll change gears here, give
Yeah.
this a second reading tonight, and we'll get some questions answered.
First reading tonight.
Say that again?
This is first reading tonight, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The first reading
Oh,
tonight,
I
then.
was looking at the wrong one. I apologize.
Yeah.
No, I just wanted to make sure that we're all
Second
sure.
reading.
First reading tonight and then potentially pass it at
Yep.
the second reading.
Okay, I
Right.
appreciate that.
And
And
we
if I
just
could
need.
mention one thing.
Yes.
So, funny enough, I'm working on my next phase of project management. So, there are a number of things you can kind of limit in project management: costs, scope, various
Yeah.
things like that. So, I get the sense that as gray matter goes through our systems, they're triaging what's wrong or what needs to be upgraded, and bringing us recommendations. We don't have anybody currently in house that knows probably the technology behind the system. So
The scopes grow when you say do the investigation.
correct. So what we can do a lot of times is we can cost box improvements, and so if we say 100,000 a year towards SCADA improvements, then that's all
Right.
gray matter can do. So we could also formulate a contract like that, and frankly, that's how they develop software. That's kind of called an agile. You might have heard the design build concept that was brought up a few times. It's sometimes it can actually save some money. A lot of times it makes sure you get the product you really want.
Right, or works for your group. Go for it.
I've been around long enough when this thing was built.
Yeah.
And consequently, I can share with what she's describing to you folks. What we did back in 1999, and the project was over our cost abilities. And so we spent a whole week chopping away, so to speak, at various features of the plant. And I knew in time that this would all come back to haunt us, because $1 million is what we were trying to save from there. And as you can see, I recognize all this terminology that she's talking about, the SCADA system and everything. And that is really the brains of what goes on in this facility. That's a big part of it. But now as they're beginning to, let's put it this way, grow up, so to speak, we're starting to put those automated features now back into the system and operations. So I followed what she was saying outside of the contract. I'm not involving in that. But I knew that when we paired all this back at some point in time in the future, we would actually have to put those features back in. And that's what helps limit the amount of work staff that you have, because for the most part, it was supposed to have been a fully automated system. And that's not really what we ended up getting once they paired it back. So you'll get more info. I know you'll get more information from Brian and those folks, but I can remember exactly what we did, and all of these features that they're starting now to roll out were all those things that got chopped off back in 1999. So that's a little help for you guys, if it will.
I know one process particular they're trying to target with this next phase 6 that we're hoping to start, as soon as possible, is basically the filter controls. It's already broken. It broke in the spring of last year, so they're manually operating that right now. So that is the focus of phase 6, is hopefully to get that back and running in an automated system. So it's been running manually for a year. Someone's been running it manually. So that's an example of something that is currently broken that would hopefully be fixed by this. But we can get the scope and all that figured out and more clarified for next round.
Thank you. Mr. Hill, if you'll give me a 10-minute again, and make sure the contract's been with that, I'll get this passed in time. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to adjourn the Utilities Committee with Mrs. Woods. We're going to move now to Employee and Community Relations with Mrs. Francis, Mr. Francis, to discuss water and wastewater staffing. Mrs. Francis?
Thank you, Mr. President. This is where I wake up, and I hope you've all seen Bill Murray and the Groundhog Day.
Yes.
And Sonny and Cher singing, and I hit the alarm clock. Because here we are with a number of hourly employees of the city of Mount Vernon, water and wastewater. I know I did say last meeting, I hope this doesn't come back to us. And it was explained to me what had happened. There was a mess up on the last one, and you did tell me that, and I don't think anybody was disagreeing with that. More was the question of who proofreads these things, and how long do they spend going through these things, because this is the fourth one, and I don't think we can go to a fifth one. I think this is it.
There's a rule about that, isn't there?
I think there is. Somebody's gonna get a whooping in the alley, and I don't wanna do it because I hurt. But I told Rick that we had a lengthy meeting, and I told Rick, I said, I'll give you 10 minutes, explain to council what's going on. My intentions with this is to give it a first reading, have another committee meeting, so that I want Rick to be able to explain it, and explain the foul up, all that stuff that's going on, the intentions of what's going on, why we had to get here to the fourth piece where we're at now, and why that is. And then if we don't have time for questions, we'll have a 10-minute committee meeting at the next meeting, and everybody can ask their questions. So as long as I've eaten up some of your time, I just make it shorter for you.
There you go. So this is really an intentional reason that this is coming back before you now. There's really two reasons for that. The first reason is that as we try to move positions, we do that when positions are vacated so that we're not impacting a current employee. So we couldn't move on this next plan until we had gone through some of our promotional processes. So a utility technician in the distribution and collection crew was selected as our billing office administrator. He had really spent most of the last 8 months working on some technology stuff for us, our work order system, things like that. So he wasn't as present in the distribution and collection crew anyway. And so there was some thought between Brian and myself and the mayor that, you know, splitting the crews up into 2 4s instead of having 9 employees in distribution and collection, it might be okay to give up that position that he left to get us one more full-time billing office administrator. But we couldn't do that until he had actually moved into the position, which only happened 2 or 3 weeks ago. So, you know, Mr. Brewer and I had some discussions about whether we try and bake it into the last version of this, and you know, we wanted to make sure, because if we give up a utility tech position and the guy's still in there, there's no authorization to pay that guy. So part of it's a time thing. The other part is I don't know if, I think I told most of you, Mr. Aaron Reinhardt, who we hired as the assistant director, was promoted to the permanent utility director. And I wanted to give him and Brad, who went to the billing office, an opportunity to see where we needed that person. They came back with a similar recommendation that yes, we can give up the billing office or the utility tech to get us another staff. Previously, they were at 3 full-time and 1 part-time staff. They're actually only asking to go to 4 full-time staff. So generally, this is going to save the utility, as you can see in your spreadsheet there, a little under $24,000. It'll give us the ability also to promote, not really promote, but move them up the scale. Our current staff who've been there at least 5 years, if not much longer. And part of the reason we're doing that is there are some duties in the specialist 2 job description that a specialist 1 is not in their job description. And the whole goal of this long term was that everybody in the billing office will share duties, learn duties, and things like that. So when I talked to Aaron, when I talked to Brad, it seemed like a win-win. Not only are we saving money, but we're also bringing some of our staff up to assume more responsibility, and we're also getting kind of a extra half person in the building. So I'm open for questions and anything like that.
We got about 4 minutes. Who's got a question?
I have a question. And Rick, if you correct me on my math, maybe I'm just reading this wrong, but I'm looking at the ordinance where we've got.
Mess it up again, please tell me.
Well, we've got 7 crossed out and 1 3/4 crossed out, and that's 8 3/4. And then you've got 6.5, 0.5, 1.5. So I'm reading that at 8.5. So it looks like to me like we're missing 0.25.
Let me look. So it's a half person on both sides that we're cutting out.
Okay, so the old was 8.75 on both sides, and the new is 8.5 on both sides. So that's 0.2 on each. So that is, you are cutting out a half person.
Correct.
All right.
Well, we're cutting out a half. We're actually gaining a half. So the person we're bringing in new, we didn't want to bring them in as a support specialist 2. That's the highest pay grade as a clerk, is what they used to be called. So for 2 years, they'll spend time as a specialist 1. We've actually talked internally about, during our next contract negotiation in a couple of years, we may sunset a 1 versus 2. And like we do for our public works, you spend kind of 2 years working up, and then after that 2 years, you move into the kind of top pay. So yes, the billing office is gaining only half a person.
Okay. So you're taking a half person off of this sheet and sending them to the billing office.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Because that tracks with what I've got here then.
Mm-hmm.
Anybody else?
Is this the last one? Do we
I hope
are we
so.
foreseeing anything else?
Well, the only thing I could foresee is not related to this legislation is we are currently working through our interviews for superintendent and assistant director. You'll recall that we placed Mr. Reinhardt's pay at about $72,500 due to his certifications. I could see us having a conversation in the future when we get to negotiations with candidates about potentially lowering the assistant director pay, evenly bringing up the wastewater, just as it's what we get into with salary negotiations. But that's what I'm foreseeing right now.
I mean,
Mr. Reinhardt got 72.5 as an assistant director because he had 2 class 3s. I don't know that the next person's going to have 2 class 3s.
It might be legitimate though, if, I mean, this is a new setup, and if you could come back in 6 months and say, hey, we tried this, it didn't work, we wanna try something else. I
Yeah.
mean, and that would not be,
Yeah, but I haven't heard anything lately coming out from the utility about changing it again. Part of the reason we did the broadbanding was so that Aaron could utilize people more broadly. So, for instance, we're getting former operators of plants into lab positions, which is good because they understand the plant and now they're learning the lab. And it doesn't require us coming to you and say, well, we need to create a lab operator kind of thing. So
And they'll still work over.
they'll still work overtime. So I am going to put the pause on this piece of legislation for a few months at least.
I thank you,
To
sir.
a year.
In the discussion with, Mr. Zick, we look at the base of the employees and the structure. I get it what they're trying to do. I understand that. That's, it's the structure of how the employees have been brought in, and it's the same structure that's been used for who knows how many decades. It doesn't matter what the administration, that was just the structure that they did it, and they left it that way. So here's an avenue and a window where they can see that, okay, if we change this, we can gain for ourselves less than this up. I get that. The whole purpose for me to Mr. Zick was, this is the 4th time we're looking at it, and that causes questions, and that causes red flags to come up. So that was the whole purpose of letting him speak. And my time's about up. I've got about 10 seconds, so I can tell Mr. Zick that I know how the Groundhog Day movie ends, and he gets the girl. So let's hope this doesn't come back. Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, we're gonna adjourn the employee and community relations, gonna move now on to streets and public buildings with Mr. Severance to discuss the Emmett CDBG project transport plan.
Yes, we're gonna do that, and Emily is here to talk to us about this. Got a presentation.
Okay, just turn it back on, and if you remember, it's here. Yep, you got it.
All right, I'm back. Okay. Go ahead and start, Dane Emmett. Is that what
Yes.
you want me to do?
Yes.
All right. So another CDBG project. I've talked to you guys about many. Thank goodness we were able to get a lot of grant funding for the next couple years for these really exciting redevelopment projects, specifically for this neighborhood, but also for our underground utilities. What we're looking to wrap up before we hit construction for the Dan Emmett area is that we need to finalize design. So far, Richland Engineering, our main engineering partner, is Pat Schwann. On this, he did all the conceptual work for the grant. So this picture that you see here, that you've seen many times, him and his team really helped to get us this grant because of all the work that they did for the concepts. So what we need to move to now is design. We have them working on survey for their design right now. I just talked to Pat today. I'm going to be sending letters out to the residents so they're aware of the survey work that'll be going on. And then his team is going to start survey work here soon. So what we need approval for is then them to work on the design for this. We are approved for construction for a new sewer line along Noose. It would also eliminate a dead-end water line that is on Marma, as well as improving the storm drain, which is behind Marma and Mansfield Avenue, that little blue line. There is no storm drain there, and it's just a lake most of the time. When it rains, it's like a swamp. So we'll be putting a new storm line there. We're going to do a little bit of storm work in front of the Dan Emmett Elementary School, right here on this blue line. And then improving the park/school parking lot as they are jointly connected. They also have ponding and not accessible parking situations there, so those will be improved. And then sidewalk and curb and gutter along Northgate, Marma, and Noose. So a lot of work consolidated into these couple of roads, but improvements that have been needed for a long time.
And we would be paving those streets as well then? Sidewalk?
So definitely Noose. Because the sewer right now is in the backyards of those individuals. Sewer should not be in the backyards of people's houses. They should be in the roadway. So we are planning to put the sewer back in the roadway where it belongs. So there would be pavement along that portion. I do believe on Marma as well. There's no major roadway work in Northgate other than installing a sidewalk and curb. So I don't believe we had any pavement there. One little extra bit of pavement that we will be doing is actually for the school's playground. I don't know if you've ever seen Dan Emmett's playground, but it's pavement. I don't even know the last time that they paved it. It's really not safe. It's got ruts. It doesn't look great. So part of the push for this grant was we need to improve the park space, which is combined with the school. So we will be doing some pavement work really specifically for the school and the park, which is not normal, because this is a weird scenario where it's half park, half school. So, but that would be part of the grant for pavement.
So is the CDB grant getting $700,000? Getting the grant, and we have.
No, that is the amount for what we received from the grant. We have a larger breakout. We also have other partners that are contributing to this grant. Aerial Foundation is going to contribute for sidewalks and playground equipment. I want to say that's about a $245,000 commitment from them. And then on top of that, $700,000. And then we would obviously break it up for our portions amongst the utility work, and sidewalk work.
And we had that breakdown when we did our budget, correct?
I think so. Yep.
Emily, are we also doing some improvements where the ball field is? Isn't that an
So
area?
that was something we talked about when we did all the public meetings with CDC of Ohio. A lot of people did explain how the ball field is so close to the road. Why is it so close to the road? I can't quite remember, but I believe we are. Oh yes, concrete barrier. So what we decided on was installing a barrier that is along the road and the baseball field. What we couldn't do in a cost-effective manner is move the entire baseball field. There's a lot of factors that go into it. So for the safety portion, we'll at least get a better barrier. If you guys drive over there, it's just like a metal barrier that's already bent in. So we will be working to get an improvement for safety there, but not moving the whole field.
Go ahead. No, if you have to go, I'll wait.
When do we see this project getting started and finished?
So as long as we can get design finished up, I talked to Pat today. He was like, once I can get the survey done, I don't have any issues with getting design completed 100% by the end of the year. And then we are pretty much ready to go for construction. CDC of Ohio is working on the fund releases and the items we need for the grant end. Once those items are ready, then we just need to take it to bid and get ready for construction. So definitely 2024 at this time, but it should be quick.
Because my wife, who teaches at Dan Emmett, and another teacher called me literally before the meeting.
Oh, yeah.
And said, "When is this going to happen?"
I know.
said, well, soon, I think.
Yes,
Sooner
and
than later.
they need it. They have a piece of playground equipment that literally has plywood on it, and kids are using that after school hours. So part of it was we talked extensively with the school, and we were like, "What do you guys need?" I think maybe playground equipment is one of your needs since it has plywood and caution tape on it. So they definitely need it, and as long as we can get this wrapped up as soon as possible, we'll get to construction and get the things ordered.
I had a few questions. When you talked about taking the sewer lines out of the backyards, putting them in the road where they're supposed to be, so that means the people that had the sewer lines hooked to their house, who pays for the re-hookup?
They're already existing customers. I believe, from my understanding, is that we complete those. But I understand like the service lines because they would be in the backyards. I think the main houses of concern are just these couple right here, and then it juts down. So it may only be 2 or 3. But I can look into it because there would have to be adjustments made. And
But that will
I'm
be,
not
I'm sure that'll be a question. There's people sitting there goes, who's gonna pay for that?
Mhm.
And I'm sure the ones are going, am I one of those she just pointed out that's gonna pay for that? So
Yeah,
I'd assume it
I'm
would too, and I just,
thinking
cause if I get those
so.
phone calls, Emily, I'm telling them to call you.
I think that because of the census tract that this is in, that's how, part of the reason why we did it here. That they would
Right.
qualify for us to rework what
Yeah.
would normally be the individual's
Yeah.
portion of the sewer line.
What's that?
Because of the census tract that they're in here, that's part of the reason why we did the
Correct.
CDBG grant here.
Low to moderate income.
And they would qualify then to have us do the portion of the work, pay for the portion of the work that would normally be the homeowners.
Okay. Is this supposed to help alleviate some of that stormwater runoff we're having problems with Mulberry Street down to Sandusky?
Yes.
That was part of the,
Yes, that was a big push in this project because essentially there is like a 24-inch or so just open storm drain.
yeah, I can take you to Mulberry Street and show you where
that
it runs
is
under.
right here, this blue line. It's just an open drain. I mean, it's a huge open culvert in someone's backyard, and it's going straight down. It's going straight down to Sandusky,
Yeah.
flowing right through.
Through the
So
McDonald's and all.
yeah, so we need to. That's why that little section is there. We will also be connecting the Dan Emmett School roof drains to the storm system, so that they're redirected. Because right now they are kind of just flowing straight into that pipe to nowhere. So that is a big push on
And then
this.
maybe Terry can help me with the street name. We have a gentleman that's right off of Noose Road that has sewer backed up in his basement several times. You know which one I'm talking about? I'm trying to figure out which
Is
street.
it? Oh, right off Noose.
Noose is the one that runs by Dan Emmett, correct? To Mansfield Avenue? He's like 2 houses up. And we have paid. He's a retired fireman, if I'm not mistaken, Terry. Does this involve him at all to fix that problem?
I
It
seem
does?
to think that he came to one of the community meetings, yeah, and
Good.
spoke, and there was the general consensus that this will help his situation as well.
Thank you.
And that's the one that's here too, right?
Yeah. I'm. Rob just brought up a good point. Similar to Clintonville, a lot of people run their drains straight to their sewers. So again, adjusting that sewer to the front of the house, and then fixing that backyard sewer, we'd be able to reconnect those.
What they've done, a lot of these people have run their outside
Downspouts.
downspouts into the sanitary sewer.
Right.
And that's a big part of the problem with the overflow, is that during heavy rains, you get this massive flood of water that shouldn't be there to begin with. And so part of what will happen here is that we'll be removing that and and putting it into where it needs to be, into the storm sewer.
Good.
Yes, because it doesn't need to be treated.
No. The curb and gutter will help too. New curb and gutter along Northgate.
Any other things or any other questions? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we're adjourning streets and public buildings. We're gonna move now to utilities with Mrs. Woods to discuss the Clintonville sewer project. Mrs. Woods.
Did you want to talk about GDP as well?
Yes, we did. Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Go.
I was like,
we have 2 minutes left, so go for it.
All right. GPD, Citywide Transportation Plan contract, is
Yes.
also on your guys' agenda today. I put a whole map of the city on it because this is a citywide transportation plan. Essentially what they are scoped out to do is take all of the ideas that have been floating around and consolidating them into one plan, and then analyzing all of those ideas based on current crash data and congestion analysis. So they will be doing that data analysis and looking at every idea we've ever come up with, if not more ideas that come up during this planning time, and getting them into one report, which will be really helpful as we continue to plan and expand and work towards grants and things like that.
Question.
And you've got all the costs out there.
This, based on current traffic and volume, is there any projection? We have several developments coming in. Is there any projection for future traffic that is going to be part of this contract?
That's part of the congestion analysis as well.
Congestion from new development.
Right. So when they do the congestion analysis, you know, we will look at what we have predicted in the past, see what we are expanding to now, those specific areas. Is that changing? Yes. And then the crash data they're looking at specifically is the 2020 to 2022 range.
Okay.
So that's not really we can't really predict on that. I mean, there'd be percentages we could estimate. But that is the range specifically for crash data. Congestion can be expanded upon.
Okay.
I will
Mel.
tell you that our number of fatal accidents in the county keeps increasing.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
We had a analysis done on transportation since I've been on council. Bruce, you may remember it. We had where all the traffic was coming from, where all it was going, and
Right.
we had several people. We never did anything with that.
So that's part of what they're going to be reviewing as well. I remembered reading that today, is looking at the previous congestion analysis, where it's coming from, and using that to determine their scoring for the options that would be the best.
We actually had somebody, a layperson that's an engineer, that come in with a better idea than what we paid hundreds of thousands of dollars for. We never used that.
Well, we can make
So
sure
are
it's
we-
on the list.
I've had him in the office sharing ideas too.
So we're gonna spend this $115,000 in, what are we gonna do with it?
So
Maybe that's a question for you.
We're gonna have a transportation plan.
This is the bedrock for a lot of the grants we apply for. They want to see this sort of
Yeah.
work as part of the grant application.
Makes more sense. Thank you.
yeah, we have to have it consolidated.
Yeah.
And when, especially because they're going to actually be scoring it, that will be a huge help for grants. We can say these are our top 3 issue areas, and this is what we're going to do for it. It's in the plan. It's approved. Council has accepted the plan. That's huge for grants.
And we'll also share that obviously at regional planning, because as the county seat, this is the year where we rewrite the comprehensive plan, and so transportation is a huge part of that with all of the growth that's on the horizon.
Good. Any other questions? We are out of time.
And adjourned.
Mrs. Woods, we're back to you.
Can you send that to council, that one particularly? Sorry.
Mhm. Okay,
Great. Thank you.
Clintonville. Up the road from Dan Emmett. So as you guys know, we have already completed phases 1 and 2 for the Clintonville project. This is based on our EPA mandate. Please keep in mind that the EPA mandate to have our sanitary sewer overflow eliminated is due September 1st of this year. Phase 1 and 2 were successful to an extent, but they are not reaching our level as desired by our mandate. We expected that. We know we have to do phase 3. So we are asking for approval to get that to bid today. Our costs are listed out there. Originally, we were not going to replace the water line along Grange. We want to do this because the whole road is going to be torn up for this. We don't need to come into a situation where we completely repave the road and then we have to dig it up again, as we had to do on Pearl this year, right after it was paved. We know that this water line in this area has issues. It's directly connected to Mansfield Avenue. We know that one has issues. So we would like to move forward in this bid with getting that water line in there as well. The yellow line on Fern is just going to be storm. The storm and sanitary were worked on during phase 1 and 2 in the backyards, and there's just that small section of storm that needs constructed in their front yards. Then the yellow line on Grange, that is sanitary and storm both, blue line being water.
So Emily, adding the replacement of the water is not included in those numbers, is that correct?
Yes, it is.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
The top.
Yep, first line is water. Total adds everything up.
You've got a bullet point at the bottom, adding replacement water line, so that's included in.
Yes.
Gotcha.
I just am wanting to say
Yep.
our original plan was not to have the water line. We would like to add that right now to eliminate any issues when we repave this road, and it's really nice and we don't want to dig a hole in it.
So we spent a lot of time and money out there. This is up for second reading. I know we're pushing a deadline. I'm assuming you guys pass sooner than later. Does anybody have any other questions about this phase of this?
I do.
Yes.
Not so much in passing it, but we had the meeting with the neighbors, what, 2 years ago now?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Grange Avenue. There's a lot of people on that street that have my phone number. Are we communicating back with them what's going to happen, when it's going to happen, and how it's going to happen?
Yeah, I'm gonna run the same process as if this is a new project. We plan to have another meeting with all the neighbors. Same thing at Faith Lutheran Church. Have the design plans out there. I'll send letters before it gets started. Door hangers if I need to. I've done that a few times recently because people say that they don't get the letters, so I go for door hangers. But we do want to operate this as a brand new project. And with each brand new project, we want to get into the habit of having those meetings with the neighbors because they are helpful.
Mel and I'd be more than happy to help you with those door hangers. We need
Yeah.
to, because I know Mel walks by there every
I
morning.
walk over there every day.
Yeah,
And I hear it. Well,
Yeah.
not every day.
We'll just let the police know that before light, he's hanging stuff on doors.
yeah.
But my other,
My hoodie on. That would matter.
Sometimes I send Nick out because Nick's already in his truck.
but
and
no,
I'm
I'd
like, "Go,
be
Nick,
more
go
than
get
happy.
my door hangers
know the
out."
neighborhood well. So when's this supposed to start?
Well, as long as we can go through and get bids out, we would expect for this summer or sooner. Everything is, I believe, closed out for 1 and 2, so we're ready to go on this.
I'm serious, though. I'd be more than happy to help you get the word out. Saves on phone calls. Thank you.
So 2 questions. The work we've done out there already, have we had people tie into the services that run that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, everyone is in. I would say there was a septic tank that nobody knew about that we had to abandon. That was about a $10,000+ job because nobody knew it existed. The owner didn't know. But they did get tied in. That is adjusted. So I would say that was a big issue that we came across.
And does phase 3 finish up that area? In your
For sanitary and storm, I believe we would have some work on Clinton. And then ideally water line in the future for this group. We'll get the Grange water line in for this, but we know there's issues with the water line for the rest of these roads right here. So that'd be a future project.
So I do walk there literally every day.
Mhm.
The corner there, we're at Pearl and Grange, where we will
Mhm.
pave. I do want to look at that with somebody there because that corner's getting cut way short, and I'm pretty sure that like even garbage trucks cannot make that turn. So
Oh, yeah.
the guy on the north side of that who just built the gray house like a year ago, he's ready to move away because
They just
number
keep
one, they're
cutting the corner.
they're cutting the corner, and then they're still using it as a cut through,
Okay.
which we can't control that. But anyway, I want to make sure we look at
Interesting. Yeah.
that. Okay.
we entertaining having the same contractor?
I don't believe so.
Well,
I don't
let me talk
believe
about
so.
Good.
We
the
will
same
see what bids
contractor
come in.
possibly, but
We will
not the
see what
same
bids
work
come
crew
in.
that started there first that screwed everything up and we had to go back in and
Bids.
redo it all.
Process.
Yes.
We'll see who
Yeah.
shows up.
Yeah, I mean,
At their
part of
cost,
it is
by the
that
way.
this goes out to bid.
Yeah.
We see who comes in, and if necessary, we will have a discussion about what lowest and best means.
Thank
Yes.
I had a quick one, and I
Mm-hmm.
cannot remember all the neighborhoods. Is this another one of the neighborhoods where a lot of the stormwater is piped into the sanitary?
This is particularly bad in
Yes.
this neighborhood.
Yeah.
Probably one of the biggest issues, and that's why we have the sanitary sewer overflows. Almost everyone's basement floor drains are connected to the sanitary. A lot of washers, a lot of washers are going into that. Then utility sinks, and then the roof drains. They're all going to the sanitary. Is what we expect. Yep.
Area where we have the city soil. And there's, or excuse me,
Yep.
very
Thank you, sir.
We're gonna adjourn Utilities Committee, and we're now in recess until 7:30. We begin the legislative portion of the meeting.
So you're losing your boss, I see.
Mike,
Oh, yeah.
Mike, resolution number 21 and 22. Do you have any problem with passing those two today?
One's a dump truck, what's the other one?
One is to purchase the equipment for the public works, and the other one is to sell things by sealed bid.
We're putting them on gov deals.
No, I don't have a problem with that.
Okay.
Yeah, those are the vehicles we're all putting on gov deals.
Okay, let's see, where's that other thing I have to find? Got my stuff all messed up now.
He's been there 10 years.
Long, quite a long time. I know.
And he came when you
Mike's resolutions are way too long.
said, I'm gonna be,
It takes a while for the computer to download them.
so he,
That's why I print my stuff out. It's easier to,
It's now 7:30. Gonna call the February 13th meeting of Mount Vernon City Council to order. Mr. Hill, please call the roll.
Mrs. Woods.
Here.
Mr. Francis.
Here.
Ms. Keener.
Here.
Mr. Hillier.
Here.
Mrs. Seaval.
here,
Mr. Severance.
Here.
Mr. Mahan.
here?
We are in session, and Pastor Justin Meyer from Grace Baptist Church will give the invocation. Please rise to the invocation and remain standing for the pledge.
Good evening. As announced, I'm Pastor Justin Meyer from Grace Baptist Church and have the honor of serving at that church in this community for 13 years. And I again just want to thank you all for allowing me the opportunity and privilege to pray for you. Let us pray. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we thank you and praise you for this glorious day that you have provided and blessed us with. We thank you for your grace and mercy bestowed upon each and every one of us. Thank you for the opportunity to pray for these, your servants, Mayor Starr, our city manager, our city staff, and our city council members as they seek to do what is honest and best for our community and county. I pray that you continue to lead them and guide them as they make decisions based upon your holy word. I pray that you would be glorified tonight through the decisions of this city council. I ask that you continue to watch over them and their families as they work to serve for us. I ask you, Lord, that you would also be with all of our first responders as we are thankful for all the work that they do to protect and serve us. I pray for their families that you would keep them safe as they are out and protecting and serving us. Again, we thank you for the work that is being done here. And again, we ask in everything that we say and do here in this place, in our homes, and as we work in our communities, that we all seek to bring honor and glory to our Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ. We ask that you forgive us of our sins and shortcomings, and we ask all these things in the name of our Lord and Savior. Amen.
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 Thank you, Pastor.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Council, in your packet were the minutes from the January 23rd meeting. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, I'd ask for a motion for approval.
So move.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. They are approved. Mr. Hill, any petitions or communications?
There are none.
And council, in your packet were the committee reports from about 6 committees for your review. I see no liquor control licenses or proclamations or people asking to speak matters of public concern this evening. So we'll now go into the legislative portion of the meeting. Council, in your packet is the agenda. Are there any additions or corrections? If not, I'll assume it's approved by consensus. And Mr. Hill, I'll ask that you read these by title and number only this evening. There are no resolutions for third reading. We do have 2 for second reading. The first one is resolution number 2023-11. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2023-11, a resolution approving the PND Comprehensive Development Plan as submitted by Highland Real Estate and approved by the Mount Vernon Municipal Planning Commission for parcel number 66-00501.000 on Newark Road and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Hillier.
Thank you, Mr. President. Council would like to give this a second reading tonight. We'll have a public hearing at the, in 2 weeks. There's a gentleman here from Highland Real Estate. If you have questions tonight, be more than happy. I'm sure he'd stay there and answer your questions for you. Thank you.
Thank you. The next one is resolution number 2023-12. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2023-12, a resolution authorizing the Safety Service Director to advertise for bids and enter into contract for Phase 3 of the Clintonville Sanitary and Storm Sewer Project and declaring an emergency.
Mrs. Woods.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the rules requiring 3 separate readings and take resolution 2023-12 to its third and final reading.
Second.
Been moved and second to suspend the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Hillier.
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt.
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
The rule is suspended. Mrs. Woods.
Thank you. I move to adopt resolution 2023-12.
Second.
Been moved and second for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mrs. Woods.
So we had a good discussion earlier. If anybody has any further questions, Emily's here, I'm sure can fill you in, but this has been needed for a while.
Any discussion? Mr. Hill.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Hillier.
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt.
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
The resolution is adopted. We now move the resolutions for first reading. The first one is resolution number 2023-16. Mr. Hill.
Resolution number 2023-16, a resolution authorizing the Safety Service Director to accept the gift of a statue from the Ariel Foundation and declaring an emergency.
Mrs. Keener.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the rule requiring 3 separate readings, taking resolution 2023-16 to its third and final reading.
Second?
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill.
Mrs. Woods.
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Ms. Keener.
Yes.
Mr. Hillier.
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt.
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
The rule is suspended. Mrs. Keener.
Mr. President, I move to adopt resolution 2023-16.
Second?
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mrs. Keener.
This is a resolution which is approving this gift that has been donated to the city. Attached to this gift, we did receive a grant that will cover costs in the placement of this statue and in future maintenance. There was a letter that went out to council from the donors, and I had asked for any questions, so.
You might tell the public where it's going to be located.
Oh, this,
And what it is.
well, you can see in the picture there, it is a 9-foot Statue of Liberty. It is completely based on the statue that is placed in New York City. It was one of the smaller models that was created, so it is from that mold. It will be placed at the CA&C, which is really something that in our Parks Master Plan, we wanted that particular green space to be the gateway to our community. It is the center for walking paths and bike paths. Our viaduct goes right across there, so this will be a major focal point for that area.
I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Wherever this is located, are they gonna have high definition cameras on it? Because anytime we put something nice up like this or something that's donated, somebody wants to desecrate it. And it's, I mean, I don't care what it is, it's the Statue of Liberty, and I would hope that we would have something on it that we could see the individual or individuals who may do that.
While there will be a gate around it to bring some protection, Ariel Foundation Park does have cameras in place on some of the park, and I believe that they can already view this particular area from the cameras that are already in place. But this is a concern, that's why part of that maintenance fund was in there, in order to be prepared for that situation, should it arise.
If I could.
Sorry.
No, just, I do see it's in section 1. It's from Ariel Foundation. I, for one, would like to thank them for this. And my conversation with them, where I believe she said it was, the money was going to maybe raise it up on the pedestal high enough that John, it'll eliminate some of that climbing on it, whatever that may be. And I think she actually mentioned a bench or two. So it's not going to be just a statue sitting on the ground along with that. So I I appreciate the gift from Ariel.
And I believe that that was in the letter, which should be available to the public as well.
Give
Any
me
other
you're tired,
questions?
you're poor, your humble masses yearning to be free. Any other discussion? Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Resolution is adopted, and we extend our appreciation to Ariel Foundation for that donation. Next resolution is Resolution 2023-17. Mr. Hill?
Resolution number 2023-17, a resolution authorizing and directing the Safety Service Director of the City of Mount Vernon, Ohio, to purchase a new dump truck for the Mount Vernon Water Department through the State Cooperative Purchase Plan and declaring an emergency.
Mrs. Woods?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the rules requiring 3 separate readings and take resolution 2023-17 to its third and final reading.
Second?
Been moved and seconded for suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
The roll is suspended. Mrs. Woods?
Thank you. Move to adopt resolution 2023-17.
Second?
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mrs. Woods?
Mr. Zick?
Yeah. So I went back during the budgeting process. Council has budgeted up to $100,000 for the purchase of this equipment, which is over 30 years old. One of the reasons we are asking for approval tonight is thanks to our distribution and collections crew, they were able to hunt around to various dealerships and find a vehicle that, I guess the order was canceled, which means, a rarity today. If council approves it, they could actually take possession as early as this week. So, if we aren't able to approve it today, we will have to probably let that vehicle go and go through the process of ordering a new vehicle, which could take, as we all know, many months. Though council approved up to $100,000, the cost is a little under $92,000. So, well within what's been budgeted. And I would like to thank our distribution and collection team because they really did all the work.
That's a real opportunity. I really appreciate that.
Plans for the old one?
Eventually they'll bring they'll bring a resolution before council to either, probably sell that old. It is a 1991 dump, so I don't know how much we'll get, but we'll give it a shot.
Don't be surprised.
Yeah.
Fredericktown just sold their 31-year-old vacuum truck for $40,000.
You're not into marketing, right? You're not trying to market that used,
Who knows what it'll bring?
Any other discussion? Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
The resolution is adopted. Next resolution is Resolution 2023-18. Mr. Hill?
Resolution number 2023-18, a resolution authorizing and directing the Safety Service Director of the City of Mount Vernon, Ohio, to enter into contract with Gray Matter Systems LLC and declaring an emergency.
Mrs. Woods?
Thank you, sir. We'll give this first reading and again a 10-minute meeting at the next council.
Resolution 2023-18 receives its first reading. Next resolution is Resolution 2023-19. Mr. Hill?
Resolution number 2023-19, a resolution authorizing and directing the Safety Service Director of the City of Mount Vernon, Ohio, to enter into contract with Richland Engineering Limited and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Severns?
Yes, I move to suspend the rule requiring 3 separate readings and take resolution 2023-19 to its third and final reading.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
The roll is suspended. Mr. Severns?
Yes, I move to adopt resolution 2023-19.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mr. Severns?
We heard a we had a committee meeting on this. I don't know if there are any other questions. Emily's still here for us. This is something that we do want to try to move forward. I think it's a good project. Yes.
Terry, does this come out of contract engineering or the grant? This is, Richland Engineering. Maybe Emily knows.
Oh, that'd be coming out of.
Thank you.
And do you have a timeline on how soon this will be done?
I would expect the latest by the end of the year. Honestly, Pat's gonna be starting survey soon, so it could be a little faster, but definitely by the end.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes?
Mrs. Seaval,
Yes.
Mr. Severance,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
Resolution is adopted. Next resolution is Resolution 2023-20. Mr. Hill?
Resolution number 2023-20, a resolution authorizing and directing the Safety Service Director of the City of Mount Vernon, Ohio, to enter into contract with Gloss, Pyle, Schomer, Burns, and DeHaven Incorporated, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Severance?
Yes, I move to suspend the rule requiring 3 separate readings and take Resolution 2023-20 to its third and final reading.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval,
Yes.
Mr. Severance,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
The rule is suspended. Mr. Severance?
Yes, I move to adopt Resolution 2023-20.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mr. Severance?
Again, we had a committee meeting on this. Something we need to move forward to get this plan in place. Emily's here if you have any other questions about that. I think it's something we want to do, though.
Same question. Projected timeline.
I don't know the projected timeline on this. I would say that if we're in the same spot, they can start. I've got some work to do on my end, so I've got to gather up all of the plans that have been floating around for years. So once I can get those over to them and organize, then they'll be definitely ready to go.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval,
Yes.
Mr. Severance,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
The resolution is adopted. Next resolution is Resolution 2023-21. Mr. Hill?
Resolution number 2023-21, a resolution authorizing and directing the Safety Service Director of the City of Mount Vernon, Ohio, to purchase equipment for the Public Works Department and declaring an emergency.
Mrs. Seaval?
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to suspend the rules requiring 3 separate readings and take resolution number 2023-21 to its third and final reading.
Second?
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval,
Yes.
Mr. Severance,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan,
Yes.
The rule is suspended. Mrs. Seaval?
I move to adopt resolution number 2023-21.
Second?
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mrs. Seaval?
Thank you. This is about buying some new equipment. Would you like to talk to us about this equipment?
Absolutely. So Mr. Hinkle is getting ready to place orders for equipment, as we all know, especially when it comes to the snowplow up at the top there. We probably won't even see that vehicle this year. So the sooner we can place orders, the better. I will say that all of these items were provided to council as they considered the budget earlier this year under the equipment capital improvements. So, yeah, the sooner we can get things ordered, one day they'll arrive.
And we're getting some new video surveillance equipment too, which is good.
Yeah, Tom has been working very heavily over the last year, improving our video surveillance. You know, we have had an increase in vandalism, and the hope is that we can either discourage that or at least, you know, find the people who are doing it.
And we don't want a dirty new garage, so we need a sweeper.
Absolutely. For many years, what they found when they were working on the garage right over here is there wasn't a real good plan in place for cleaning salt and dirt and things out, and that created a lot of corrosion in our drain systems and stuff. So the hope is that with a garage sweeper, they'll be able to extend the life of that.
And we need a new truck for the cemetery.
Yep, that truck is old. I'll just say. I mean, it's on its last leg.
Okay, great. Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, just quickly. So we just approved money to buy this dump truck that came available. So if we have the money set aside for this year, Terry, should something like that happen again with one of these vehicles or equipment, we could purchase it immediately then, correct? Okay, good.
Any other discussion? Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Resolution is adopted. Next resolution is Resolution 2023-22. Mr. Hill?
Resolution number 2023-22, a resolution authorizing the Safety Service Director to sell by sealed bid or dispose of equipment in the Public Works Department not needed for public use by the City of Mount Vernon and declaring an emergency.
Mrs. Seaval?
Thank you. I would like to suspend the rules requiring 3 separate readings and take resolution number 2023-22 to its 3rd and final reading.
Second?
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
The rule is suspended. Mrs. Seaval?
Thank you. I move to adopt resolution number 2023-22.
Second?
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mrs. Seaval?
Okay, now we need to sell some equipment, so would you like to explain?
So in order to keep everything straight, because Mr. Hinkle is always replacing equipment, he typically pairs his purchase request with his disposal request. So many of these items can be disposed of by GovDeals or other auction today. Some of them will remain in the fleet until he does receive delivery of new vehicles. So this is really everything that Mr. Hinkle has requested be replaced this year, the old version to be sold. When it comes to water, wastewater, I'm not as familiar with that. Do you, Terry, know much about that?
Same thing.
Same thing, replacement. So
I have a question. It says by sealed bid, but does that give them the authority? I like GovDeals idea. Just sealed bid gives.
Well, it's specifically, if you take a look at section 2, it says, Safety Service Director be authorized and directed to sell, dispose of vehicles, equipment pursuant to any method authorized by revised code section 721.15. That's the operative language there, and that includes sealed bids, GovDeals, and several other things.
Any other discussion?
My only question is, and I'm sure Mr. Hinkle's a lot smarter about this than I am, but I see like a lot of mowers, this, that. I assume we've got backup equipment if needed, not just the new we're bringing in. If one breaks down, we don't have to turn around and hurry up and buy another one.
you know, typically the reason we dispose of them within 4 or 5 years is they still have value. That's what he's told me. So they're really not usually at risk of complete failure. And I will say that one thing our whole public works department, from cemetery to parks, has been phenomenal about is they maintain them themselves. So we could find a backup somewhere. Sometimes if we've had a major problem, we can do a rent for a little while until we get it back up and running. Oh, go ahead.
Mm-hmm.
They are.
Yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Any other discussion? Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Resolution is adopted. Next resolution is Resolution 2023-23. Mr. Hill?
Resolution number 2023-23, a resolution allowing the Muskingum Valley Council of the Boy Scouts of America to hold the 2023 Spring Camporee at Ariel Foundation Park and declaring an emergency.
Mrs. Keener?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to suspend the rule requiring 3 separate readings and take Resolution 2023-23 to its 3rd and final reading.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension?
One reason I'd like to suspend this is so that the Boy Scout troop can make their plans after potentially we approve this. I don't want them to be hanging on to try and find their location.
Have they checked the weather forecast? We did that a few years ago, and they needed swim fins. It rained the entire weekend.
Hopefully our stormwater's better than that now.
Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seavolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
The roll is suspended. Mrs. Skeeter?
Thank you, Mr. President. I move to adopt Resolution 2023-23.
Second?
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension?
So what this legislation is about is
I mean,
allow-
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
for the adoption, I'm sorry.
Sorry.
The adoption of the resolution. Sorry.
Is allowing this particular group to utilize the park after its normal closing hours. Those restrictions would just be lifted for this group, and the restrictions would still be in place for the rest of the park. This is something that has happened before, so when was the last time?
The year it opened,
14.
14?
yeah, 2014.
2014.
Yeah.
I
So,
recall one also a couple years ago, maybe for a different park, but
Well, a few years ago, we allowed a bicycling group who was coming through to overnight in the park, but those are the only two times we've allowed camping in the parks.
so there is a precedent for this in Ariel Foundation Park specifically.
Just so people know where it is, last time it was across from where ABC,
In the big sort of meadow area.
yeah, that big meadow up back there. As you go to the top of that one hill, the tower, it looks down past it, and it's a nice flat area for a camporee.
So I assume this has been approved through the powers that be of Ariel Foundation, or the
They
Ariel
were
Park?
the ones who brought it to our attention, so they were first approached.
Good.
Any other discussion? Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seavolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Resolution is adopted. Next resolution is Resolution 2023-24. Mr. Hill?
Resolution number 2023-24, a resolution authorizing and directing the auditor of the City of Mount Vernon to pay bills from 2022 and declaring an emergency.
Mrs. Seawold?
Thank you. I would like to suspend the rules requiring 3 separate readings and take resolution number 2023-24 to its third and final reading.
Second?
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seavolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
The roll is suspended. Mrs. Seawold?
Thank you. I move to adopt resolution number 2023-24.
Second?
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mrs. Seawold?
Well, Mr. Scott's standing up to tell us all about this.
Thank you, Mrs. Seavolt and council. We have a time period here at the beginning of the year where we have crisscrossing of purchase orders and invoices. So these are old bills that are incurred from 2022, but they'll be using appropriations from the 2023 appropriations. So we have a number of those down through here. If anybody has any specific questions, I'll be glad to address any of those for you.
Terry, what was number 2 for?
Number 2 would have been, you know what, I didn't bring that with me, but, it's coming out of contract engineering. So I'm not sure, Emily, do you recognize, EMH&T.
I'm not.
Is that transportation? I think we use them for transportation issues, if I'm familiar with, yeah.
And number 10?
Number 10, that would be our attorney for our labor relations.
And workman's comp, yeah.
Any other discussion?
Thank you.
Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seavolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
Resolution is adopted. Final resolution for this evening is resolution number 2023-25. Mr. Hill?
Resolution number 2023-25, a resolution authorizing and directing the auditor of the City of Mount Vernon to pay bills pursuant to section 5705.41D, then and now certification.
Mrs. Seawold?
Thank you. I would like to suspend the rules requiring 3 separate readings and take resolution number 2023-25 to its third and final reading.
Second?
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
The roll is suspended. Mrs. Seabolt?
Thank you. I would like to move to adopt resolution number 2023-25.
Second?
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this resolution. Any discussion? Mrs. Seabolt?
Time to pay. Okay,
It's
Mr.
always
Scott.
the case,
Oh,
isn't it?
isn't it though? I don't know why. Of course, I saw that last bill, $43,000. I thought, boy, I'd have been on that one right off the bat.
Thank you, Ms. Seavolt and Council. For this particular one, these are then and now, so that means purchase orders were not encumbered timely in regards to these transactions. First one is coming out of the fire department in regards to training that was going on Bowling Green State University. They had two people going. One of them didn't get their paperwork in time. I think we've already talked with the department in that regards. Don't see that very often in this department. Item 2 for Birch Hydro. This is in regards to sludge removal. We were working through last year trying to get as much of that as we can get removed out. Believe it or not, one day short of getting their purchase order in timely. So consequently, we do have a pending bill in regards to Birch Hydro.
Terry, Birch Hydro, they were under contract?
Yeah.
Are they still?
I believe they still are, yes. From the 2022 year. From the 20,
So even though they're under contract, you still do a PO for every?
yes. Every transaction.
Any other discussion?
Thank you, Mr. Scott.
Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
That concludes the resolutions. We now move to ordinances. We had to have no ordinances tonight for third reading or second reading. We do have 6 for first reading. The first one is ordinance number 2023-01. Mr. Hill?
Ordinance number 2023-01, an ordinance to create the position of Human Resources Intern and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Francis?
Thank you, Mr. President. We're gonna give ordinance 2023-01 a first reading.
This ordinance receives its first reading. Next ordinance is ordinance number 2023-02. Mr. Hill?
Ordinance number 2023-02, an ordinance to create the position of Law Director Intern and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Francis?
We will also give ordinance 2023-02 first reading and ask for a 10-minute committee meeting.
Can we put that other intern position in the same meeting?
Pardon me?
Yes.
The one prior, can we discuss it as
I
well?
was just gonna say,
Okay.
and include 2023-01 for that same meeting.
Thank you.
Ms. Johnson will be here at the next meeting to answer any questions that anyone might have, or she'll be happy to answer them if you have them prior to the meeting.
Thank you, Rob.
This ordinance receives its first reading. Next ordinance is ordinance number 2023-03. Mr. Hill?
Ordinance number 2023-03, an ordinance fixing the number of hourly employees of the City of Mount Vernon in the water and wastewater departments and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Francis?
I think we're gonna give ordinance 2023-03 a first reading and also ask for a 10-minute committee meeting. And I would suggest if anybody wants to talk any more about this position, get with Mr. Sick.
This ordinance also receives its first reading. Next ordinance is ordinance number 2023-04. Mr. Hill?
Ordinance number 2023-04, an ordinance fixing the compensation and benefits of certain employees of the Mount Vernon Municipal Court effective January 1, 2023, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Francis?
Thank you, Mr. President. We are going to ask for suspension of the rules requiring 3 separate readings and take 2023-04 to its third and final reading.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt,
Yes.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
The roll is suspended. Mr. Francis?
Move to adopt 2023-04.
Second.
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this ordinance. Any discussion? Mr. Francis?
Thank you, Mr. President. Terry, come forward. I'll just repeat what he said to me. Was everything that's highlighted is what's changed. And this is, these are pieces of legislation that come before us. Is it on a yearly basis, Terry?
Yes,
So I'll let you run through.
sure. Thank you, Mr. Francis and Council. This is, the first one is in regards to our probation officer number 4 and our merit drug court coordinator. Judge Thatcher has provided his recommendation before council in the standard 3%. It's the standard that we have for all of our personnel in the year of 2023. So, and now keep notes, these two people, if you were following here, J-RIG, we call that the J-RIG grant, Justice Rehabilitation and Incentive Grant, and as long as they continue to get funding, these positions continue on. Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion? Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
The ordinance is adopted. Next ordinance is ordinance number 2023-05. Mr. Hill?
Ordinance number 2023-05, an ordinance fixing the compensation and benefits of certain employees of the Mount Vernon Municipal Court effective January 1, 2023, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Francis?
Thank you. Request suspension of the rules requiring 3 separate readings. Take ordinance 2023-05 to its third and final reading.
Second?
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
The roll is suspended. Mr. Francis?
Move to adopt ordinance 2023-05.
Second?
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this ordinance. Any discussion? Mr. Francis?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Scott, since you're still up there, we'll just let you run through this one.
Thank you, Mr. Francis. Council, on this is the clerk of the municipal court. Judge has established again a 3% increase. Total would be $66,187.80. Be aware, though, that this is a 3/5, 2/5 share between us and Knox County. The county, under the statute, indicates that they pay 2/5 of the clerk's compensation, and we pay 3/5 in regards to that.
Now, how does that work? If we adopt a pay raise, how do we know the county's gonna go along with it? It's mandated that they do it?
Yeah, I give them a copy of your ordinance, and when we send it up to them, they have it and put it in their records. Yep. Same
So
thing
it-
happens with the judge, the bailiff, and the clerk.
They don't have much of a choice.
Right.
No.
I thought. Any other discussion?
I will say, though, in my years of doing this, I have yet to have a judge give me a court order.
Yeah, that's important. Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis.
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval,
Yes.
Mr. Severns.
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
The ordinance is adopted. The final ordinance this evening is ordinance number 2023-06. Mr. Hill?
Ordinance number 2023-06, an ordinance fixing the compensation and benefits of certain employees of the Mount Vernon Municipal Court effective January 1, 2023, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Francis?
Request suspension of the rules requiring 3 separate readings. Take ordinance 2023-06 to its third and final reading.
Second?
Been moved and seconded for the suspension of the rules. Any discussion on the suspension? Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Woods,
Yes.
Mr. Francis,
Yes.
Ms. Keener,
Yes.
Mr. Hillier,
Yes.
Mrs. Seaval,
Yes.
Mr. Severns,
Yes.
Mr. Mahan.
Yes.
The roll is suspended. Mr. Francis?
Move to adopt ordinance 2023-06.
Second?
Been moved and seconded for the adoption of this ordinance. Any discussion? Mr. Francis?
Thank you, Mr. President. Terry and I were discussing, I just wanted to throw this out there before you explain the pay rate. Judge Thatcher he's got his hand on everything with the municipal court. And as we talk, Terry let me know that he's the only municipal court judge that you know of that has sat in chambers several times with us. And that says a lot for the individual. You know, and there's stuff going on with the municipal court, new building and all that stuff. But It just, that shows you his character, that he will show up to these and sit in a meeting. So, you know, to back him up the way we do here, as well as the president said, we really don't have a choice. He'd hit his gavel and throw us in jail, so. But Mr. Scott, I'll let you run through these.
Thank you again. On behalf of council, this is the recommendation from Judge Thatcher as well. This is his court security officers. He has two different officers, and so their pay rates are a little bit different just because of the time period of how long they've been on the job. So we appreciate council's support on this as well. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Mr. Hill?
Mrs. Woods?
Yes.
Mr. Francis?
Yes.
Ms. Keener?
Yes.
Mr. Hillier?
Yes.
Mrs. Seabolt?
Yes.
Mr. Severance?
Yes.
Mr. Mahan?
Yes.
The ordinance is adopted, and that concludes the legislative portion of our meeting this evening. We now move to remarks from administration. Mayor Starr.
Thank you, Mr. President. This evening, I have nothing to report, so, thank you.
Mr. Zick.
Yeah, just two items. This week, the city signed the agreement for the next year of our natural gas aggregation contract. Dealing with our broker, we identified a few customer service concerns with our prior providers, so the city has elected to go with IGS Energy. They also provided the best rate. In talking to him, I know there were some concerns last summer that our agreement wasn't quite beneficial. It wasn't that far off, but in reality, what we found is through the winter months, as it's been more moderate and people are using more gas, we're actually really capitalizing. So I think in talking to our provider, this aggregation program has always really worked in the benefit of our citizens in terms of getting lower energy costs than they would get just a standard, Columbia gas bill.
So just to clarify, you said that it's been more moderate and we've used more gas.
Well, it's just the winter months are when people typically use more gas, so the savings they got, even though the moderate temperature kept the rates low, and then we were able to capture an even lower rate.
That was the clarification I was looking for. Thank you.
One thing I did want to mention on that is everybody will get a mailer offering them the opportunity to opt out of the program if they wish. We have a lot of people sending mailers around the city, and we pass this on to citizens all the time. The correct program is the one with the city logo and the letterhead and the mayor's signature on it. And, if there's any questions, they can call City Hall. We get questions about it a lot. But I want to make sure that as people get letters from other people trying to sell them natural gas, if you want to be in the city's program, look for our letterhead and our mayor's signature. Second thing is, I really appreciate council's action last meeting on our IT contract. It is moving very quickly. I spent the day at the county interviewing candidates. I think we've got a good candidate in mind, and we've been working pretty regularly with county IT already on kind of looking at our systems. So appreciate council's action on that, and before the end of the month, there's going to be a lot of movement. That's all.
Thank you. Mr. Scott.
Nothing further, Mr.
Mr. Braun.
I have nothing, thank you.
Mr. Francis.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm the first one up. I've only got a half a dozen things to talk about. So. 3 things. 1, 10 years ago, we sat down for quite some time and discussed the property maintenance ordinance. I believe within that ordinance is yard signs. And if the yard sign is between the sidewalk and the curb, that's city property.
Yep.
And the city has the right to pull it out if it takes up space or it's unwanted there. And we don't want it there, because I know when we run for elections, you got a certain day you can put it out, and then you got a certain day to take it up, because they will pick them up and take them from you. So now I've heard that that's not the case. I know if it sits between the sidewalk and an individual's house, but that's their property. So do we have, Mr. Brower, or does the city have the authorization to pull those yard signs out from in?
Well, first of all, the yard sign legislation is not in the property maintenance.
Okay, see, I wasn't sure if it was in there.
It's not there. It's in the zoning code. And there is not a specific prohibition on signs in the city right of way. Or the city has the authority to control the signs placed on its property, so it can remove them. It does not generally do that. In the current ordinance, there is a provision about political signs, when you can put them in, when you can't put them in. That provision is legally unenforceable, the Supreme Court has told us. And in fact, that is one of the things that we are working on in the zoning code update, is fixing the sign code, which has several other problems as well. So
Okay.
the city can remove signs from its property if it chooses to. It's my understanding in general we don't, unless it's obstructing view on a turning radius or something like that.
If somebody had a question about this,
Mm-hmm.
who would be the person they should call?
They can call me, and I'll also work with Lacey. I will say we have had numerous conversations with Wendy from Compass Point, and one of the biggest things she's doing in zoning code rewrites is fixing sign ordinances that don't really mesh with what legal justification used to be or is today. Or
So
they can call me.
They can call Safety Service Director. Okay, the second thing is, we've heard of the homeless encampment on Route 3 and 36, High Street Bridge. It would be the southwest side. And Mr. Hilliard pointed that out, and I think we'd all seen, once the leaves had fallen, if you come around that way, we have all seen that area. Well, it caught fire. And I know the mayor had been contacted. I believe High Street Bridge was closed down for a period of time because of the fire, probably for the equipment and stuff. That piece of property lies within the jurisdiction of the state of Ohio and the county.
It's the state of Ohio and Clinton Township. It's the state of Ohio owns the property, and it resides within Clinton Township.
Right. So that's where it's located. The city has offered to clean it up, right?
We wanted to make sure we got permission from the state before we went in there, because it is.
If we had decided not to, and there again, this is one of those subjects we had the same problem down by Arch Park, you know, and it was little islands of township within the city, but we was able to get them to come into the city. That's for that particular incident. This is state property within Clinton Township. If we had not offered to do that, who would be responsible to clean that up? I don't, and the reason, here's why I'm asking, because our big brother, who's in our backyard, or our front yard, or wherever you wanna say that's the High Street Bridge, West High Street, is the gateway coming into Mount Vernon. And that's the first thing. It was covered up during the spring and summer, and then it was set fire. Now, we've known they've been there for quite some time. I'm guessing there was nothing the city could do to chase them off because it's not in the city. I can't see that the sheriff couldn't have seen that happening and step up and do something. I don't know if the state pays attention to that stuff, but we're gonna take the responsibility for irresponsible people. And this is where we have to collectively think, okay, how are we going to take care of that? Because those individuals that were there were the ones that were at Arch Park. And before they went to Arch Park, they was on the northwest side of the river, which belongs to the city. And then when they left there, they went back to the Merrick National Can. And then when they left there, they ended up over there. That's a 5-month stroll. They just go from one place to another. And each one of them, they end up setting fire or pitching everything into the river. So these are the same individuals. And we need to think of who are we going to hold responsible for this? Because they've chosen a path to go down, and many of them have been doing this for years. And now they've set fire to the roadside and shut down our state highway. And I think we need to look into that and see just exactly where our jurisdiction is to be able to hold people responsible for it. And with all that said, tomorrow is the day of love. It's Valentine's Day, and I'll end it with that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Mrs. Woods?
Thank you. Mr. Zick, can we talk about the gas company?
Mhm.
The last time the city made a selection, I knew enough, but I have a gentleman knock.
Mhm.
Can I assume the only way the city contacts people is card?
Yes.
Or,
Yes.
right.
The letter.
So can we kind of get the word out there that that's the only way? He was literally going up our.
Yeah.
It correlated with the same time, so I'm sure people.
Todd he'll attest dozens, if not hundreds, of aggregation calls, and he knows the process very well. And we do try and get the word out with a press release every time there's a change. But sometimes, and we've done work. There was an aggregator that had a solicitor permit, but that has since expired. So, in many ways, there really is no permanent solicitor registered with the city. So if you have a solicitor come to your door, just turn them away.
See their permit.
Well, can't they call the police or your office? There's a law against it.
Yep.
I mean, I would recommend that. I don't mean to cut in,
No, but I think.
but no, tell them to leave. What I've done, I get their information. I follow them up the street, tell them here's where he's going. We need an officer here.
Yep.
And if I remember
And then we need to cite him, and then we need to throw him in court.
Because he literally used the term, the city has made a selection. In this boy, he didn't say that it made this selection. And lots of people. Okay, thank you, that's all.
Could I have
Sebo.
I'm sorry, could I have a follow-up question on that topic? The citizens, the city has come to agreement with this company, the citizens only have to opt out. Is that, just make that clear to everyone publicly. If you want to come in with the city's aggregation, you don't have to do anything. You have to sign anything. So the only reason would be to opt out.
Unless you have
Yes.
opted out in the past,
Yes.
then you have
Unless
to
you've already done it.
contact the aggregation.
Okay.
Right.
And here's how you'll know. If you get a letter from the city and you're happy with the aggregation program, do nothing, and you're in. If you don't receive a letter, and that's what we'll maybe put in the press release, and you would like to be in the aggregation program, then we can let them know who to call. Maybe they opted out in the past unknowingly. Maybe is it resident specific or is it property specific?
It's property specific. If you're a new resident and you move in after the beginning of this contract, obviously you haven't received a letter because you didn't live there. You can opt in. You can start with the aggregation whenever you move in.
I'm more worried about the people that think they're in it and they mistakenly opt.
Mrs. Sebo?
Thank you. Well, I'm going to follow John's lead and wish everybody a happy Valentine's Day, and hopefully somebody will tell someone that lives alone or knows that they don't have anybody to tell them I love you. You'll just drop them off something or just show them your care, because Mount Vernon is a caring city, and we do love our neighbors or friends. Just give somebody a little call, and because it can be very lonely on holidays like that if you don't have somebody. That's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Severance?
Yes, I'm just going to talk about the yard signs again because I have received a call from a certain person a few times, and Mr. Mahan had a chance to sit in on one of those calls with me, but according to this person, Mount Vernon is now known as the junk city and used to be the colonial city. So I would like us to make sure that we do follow up on this. So Rob, I just want to question, so if we are allowed to remove signs, who can and who would remove the signs?
It would be at the authorization of the safety service director, because he is the ultimate authority over our property. So I strongly suggest that people not go rogue and decide to remove signs by themselves. You know, there are lots of issues. You know, when we find property out there, we hold it for people, things of that nature. So I strongly suggest that people not go and just decide to remove signs that they think might be on city property.
Okay, so
The
I
city
can
is
discuss that with Mr. Zick about who we might be able to do that. The other piece of that would be, I see signs that are stapled or nailed to telephone poles. Is that our jurisdiction, or is that the telephone company?
That is the pole owner's jurisdiction, and we can, and they are the ones who have to enforce that.
Okay, good, thank you for the clarification. Related to the homeless encampment, I just would ask that we maybe look toward annexing a couple pieces of property that are in this area. And Rob, I don't know if I would talk to you to begin that process. I know one of where the current camp was that burned down is state property.
Yes.
And then there's another little piece that we may need to look at that we don't know who owns. But,
Well, first of all, I would actually have to say that there have been a number of discussions among the administration about what we can do to get a better handle on this, and annexation is certainly one of them. There are procedures for annexing state property that is contiguous to the municipality that we are thinking about following. As far as other property that isn't without the owner, the way annexation law is now, the owner, unless it's state property or our own property, has to want to be annexed in. There is still right now in the city, right here in the West End, a block of 6 houses that are still in Clinton Township. And the owners of that property, the various owners, have no desire to annex into the city. So basically, if there's ever a call for police service, they have to wait for a deputy sheriff to arrive. And there's this 6 block, 6 houses right there. So it would be more efficient, and I'm sure Clinton Township would love for us to actually have those houses, but we can't. So absent it being the state property, there are ways that we could choose to annex it if we want, but unless we know who the owner of the other property is and they choose to do it, it's unlikely.
okay. I did hear Mrs. Julie Miller speak on Thursday at a luncheon last week, and she talked about the group that had been there at the area where it had burned down, and that group of people have no desire to stay in our shelters, from what she said. She
Yes.
knows them.
That's because the shelters have certain rules that they
Yes.
refuse to follow.
So they will try to find another place.
Mm-hmm.
So are they not allowed to go back there right now because it's probably still some kind of a crime scene or whatever? And,
I have no
and
idea
will they
if-
return there? We don't know.
I have no idea what they've been told about being on that property.
Okay.
I do know that the fire department, and potentially the fire marshal were looking at the cause of the fire, but I don't know anything that has or has not been told to them about coming back to that property. I've not seen them there when I drove by over the weekend, so I do not know where they currently are.
All right. Thank you.
Mr. Harrier.
Thank you, Mr. President. Just real quick on your signs. Or I can go back. I received the same phone call, but as made a suggestion, a lot of the signs that he's referring to is on the corner of Blackjack and 13 Park National Bank property. I think we're pretty good cahoots with that president of that bank. We might make a phone call. I saw Saturday I went to Newark, there were 6 signs laying in the grass. All right. Asked if their maintenance guy could pick them up, or if we can come out and pick them up. I'll go pick them up if we get the okay by the president of. That's one of the biggest corners that gets nailed with a bunch of signs. If we had something right from Park National that says you can pick up all the signs you want to out of our yard, I'll make it a point to make it my job. That would please the gentleman quicker than anything, and that would show that we're doing something. Second, Mr. Zick, in my travels in the West End, looking at brick streets, gas company, you see we're concrete patching now on High Street, and there's a lot of concrete and asphalt. I'm sorry?
Well, I've seen it too, yeah.
I didn't think that's what we did.
Typically, we don't. I don't know what it's like to get hot mix right now.
We will follow up and make sure that is
Well,
what's gonna happen.
The ordinance has that you gotta repair it with like material. So we know that we're kind of behind.
There's a
on
lot,
other things
there's
too,
a
yeah.
lot of concrete in a lot of places.
Yeah.
I was surprised to see the amount of concrete, and it's easy to see because they got this plastic sticking up out of it.
Yeah.
I follow up on the email I sent you, Mr. Zick. I did get a call from the land bank. They were going to patch up those windows on Burgess Street to make sure that we could get out. Or in, I mean, unless they're in there, they can stay. Mr. Broren, follow up to our email that I sent you, 621 North Sandusky Street. I asked if there's anything the city could do for health or safety to board up the back door on that house.
Is that the one that we?
That's the one that the gentleman's died.
We had we had some additional discussions on that, I thought.
Yeah, I found out late last week from Greg that is now before the county. Is it Board of Revision, Board of
Right.
Review?
My question was, in the meantime,
Yeah.
the door is wide open to the back of the house. People are saying they're seeing people going in and out. I'm sure it's people that don't have tents for the time. And they're afraid of drug deals and everything else. I asked if there's anything the city or somebody else that we know can do legally to board up that house until it, because the other house land bank got's been sitting there a year. And I don't think would be the best for us if somebody dies inside of that and we had a chance to board over the back door.
Well,
Is there a property
Well-
trespassing issue we run into? I mean, with the
well,
land bank.
no, is that the issue becomes that we have to be invited onto certain parts of the property, and without that invitation, we can't do anything. Now, if the county should happen to decide to take it through the Board of Revision process, and they become the owner or they transfer it to the land bank, we could certainly work with them to get something done. But until that point, it's just us, it's trespassing.
Maybe it's a possibility we talk to a judge. I know we have the drug house on Sugar Street.
Well,
Boom, court's over, boarded up house, no permission from anybody.
well, the county, to get that, filed a nuisance action in the Court of Common Pleas. And they had multiple drug buys out of that house.
I understand
They're
that.
all
I live there.
reported, and
So for the record, there's nothing we can do. And we're not gonna look any further?
there's nothing based upon the facts as I know them right now, there's nothing we can do. We are working a number of other possibilities to do something, but it just
Alright.
as it stands right now.
I'll follow up with you the next meeting. I'll send you another email. Thank you. Mayor, just a possibility. I know when I talked to the pool management, very upset. Feel that they've been
Pool
part of this
management company?
with the city of Mount Vernon.
Individual.
Oh, the individuals, okay.
I'm not the contract. No, the person, the people I was talking about earlier in the meeting. The statement was, we've been with this pool since it opened, or there shortly after. I think we deserve a little bit more than be left in the dark of what's going on. Possibly a phone call from you to the managers. I know the one manager's gone. We're not gonna get her back. But maybe the three remaining managers, let them in on what's going on, and so maybe they can tell the lifeguards that are asking for work what's going on.
Well, and I do want to say that you're right. I think we can make a phone call, have a conversation, see if they're still interested in working under a new management company. But I do want to make sure we all understand that the management was invited to have a discussion with one of the management companies before we even decided to go out to bid. They were involved at least once or twice on reviewing the bid document before it went out. So to say that they haven't been involved would be inaccurate.
I'm just, maybe an update, because like I said, quote, they're asked not to come back.
No,
It's inaccurate.
that's not
So that's
true.
the reason for a phone call. And I told this person I would quote it tonight on, so that's fine. You say it's not, just please call.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Mahan.
Thank you, sir. I had the opportunity to hear Julie Miller from the Winter Sanctuary as well. And just wanted to comment that that's a great group of people doing good work, working with St. Paul's Episcopal Church for one shelter, and I can't remember the name of the organization for the second, but they've got 2 shelters, one for men, one for women, doing good work. She commented in that presentation that there are several needs, and certainly there are people, and respect Mr. Francis said, who just aren't going to be part of the system, don't want to be part of the system. They're going to have to be held responsible for that. But there's also circumstances that just, and I just encourage the public, to check into Winter Sanctuary, and they're good people doing good work. Also, she did mention that, and we've heard from several different places, that part of the reason is we have a real shortage of housing, and we're going to have some things to consider coming up. I know those are complex situations, but just a reminder that we do need housing. We need lower cost housing. We have a supply and demand issue. So just remind the public and remind council that as those things come up, sometimes when you have it's not just about this is going to be in my backyard or not. Sometimes some people are homeless and we need some housing. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mrs. Gainer.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank Ariel Foundation for the gift that the city received today. It was a long process to get us to that point, and thank you to council for accepting that gift. I'd also just like to say that February 15th is School Resource Appreciation Day, and we really appreciate what our school resource officer does here in Mount Vernon. I had the opportunity to do a ride along with him at the middle school, and it was great to see him interacting with the kids and how positive that is, and the work that he does with Nova. So I'd encourage any of council to go in and follow him around and just see what he does every day. And he really goes above and beyond as well with working for the PAC United program that we have. So I'd just like to say thank you to that school resource officer that we have. And that's all. Thank you, Mr. President.
Tomorrow is Valentine's Day, and one person I would like to point out is Miriam Preston. And she's now at the Eastern Star, but she's going to turn 100 this week. And we're showering her with cards if you want to send a card to Miriam. Lovely lady. And she hasn't been able to get out much lately. She was very active until a year or two ago. But what a tribute to her, and what a nice person. I'd like to thank the media for being here this evening. And that being said, call for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
We move to second. We adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. We are adjourned.
That's the third person to go over the turn 100 this week for like